Could you imagine you're driving along in your used car and the warranty just ran out? Lo and behold, you're sitting at a set of lights, you hit the gas, and the engine's running, but the car's not moving forward. That could actually be a faulty transmission. It'd be just your luck, wouldn't it? Well, sadly, that's not an uncommon phenomenon, and there's three major parts in a car that can cost a huge amount of money. Engine, the bad electrics, as well as transmission. If a tranny goes, you could be faced with bills upwards of $5, $6, $7, $8,000, or possibly even more, depending if you bought the wrong vehicle or the right one. And similar to last video where I steered you away from 5 of the worst engines and the respective vehicles, I'm going to do the same thing today, and I'm going to help you avoid 5 of the worst cars and the respective transmissions, so maybe you too can avoid some big expensive repairs. Let's get into it now. Life's too short to drive boring cars. Well, the first one on our list is this beautiful little unit here in blue. Now, they look great and the styling's come a long ways, but there have been some real quality control issues with these vehicles. But let's first take a look around and try to understand why people are in fact buying these, even though they know there are some problems. Here, the latest has these beautiful headlights, beautiful flashy grille with piano gloss black finishing, vents, beautiful wheels. Of course, you got great little chrome along the rockers there, and an overall presence that is definitely strong and quite contemporary, if I might add. Look, beautiful chrome up here for hauling your used car parts to the dumpster, as well as lots of glass on top for all the little friends and family hauling inside this vehicle. Beautiful. What about the interior? Actually looks quite sharp. There's still a fair amount of use of low quality plastics, but the Q stitching on the seats adds a touch of class. Now, sadly, we know Hyundai and its sister company Kia have struggled with some real quality problems. Electrics causing potential fires. We've heard about engine failures because of rod bearing issues overheating and causing roadside ignitions, and just a plethora of quality control issues. But that's not what we're talking about. We're actually talking about transmissions today. And unfortunately, this impacts 2021 and 2022 model years. Elantra ends, Kona ends, Santa Cruz, Santa Fe, Sonata, and Veloster ends. There are actually about 53,000 vehicles directly impacted by this particular recall, which isn't a sign of confidence considering all the other history and quality control that they've been dealt with. So the specific issue we're talking about are vehicles equipped with a DCT or double clutch transmission, and it uses a high pressure pump that actually operates the system. It's all based on oil, of course. But when that pump fails, and apparently there's a pretty significant opportunity for it to do so, it gives the vehicle about 20 to 30 seconds to actually decide, hey, it's time to shut it down. And what's happening is it actually pulls the vehicle over, stops the motive power, and then you can't even move the vehicle. Now, you could potentially be in a really dangerous predicament if in fact that vehicle just randomly decides to shut down. This has been happening, and as a matter of fact, there's about 229 cases reported allegedly across the nation that have personally had this happen to them. Fortunately, there's been no directly reported accidents or injuries as a result of that. And according to NHTSA, Hyundai is on the hook for trying to replace these free of charge, but that does not inspire confidence given what we've seen in the last few years regarding faulty electrics, bad engines, as well as obvious transmission issues. How reliable is that going to be when it's 6 or 7 years of age? I don't know, but I'm not sticking around to find out. And forget the Santa Fe. Why don't you go with something like a Toyota Highlander instead? You're going to have many, many more miles of successful motoring with far fewer troubles as well. You'll guaranteed to get over 300,000 miles with these types of vehicles too. So thank goodness I got away from that Hyundai Santa Fe. Yes, stay away. The next one here is a real problem child as well, and we're talking about the Mitsubishi Outlander. Lots of little troubles. You'd think because it's a Mitsubishi Japanese, it would be actually well made and very reliable. And in a lot of ways it is, but there's still a lot of key, very expensive issues, specifically with this particular model years. Let's take a quick look around. They're very fresh looking and very unique on their own right. Great little headlights on there. Very nice laser cut wheels. Of course, great rocker panel accents on there. Of course, on the back you have some LED lights, which is pretty standard today in this Outlander. Large rear opening for all your junk in the trunk. Now this is where stuff goes wrong. It's trying to tow any significant weight with the transmission that's tucked under this particular vehicle. But what a cutesy little top up there, as well as you have a little sunroof to provide a little extra lighting in the front for the front little passengers to keep them happy, because they generally aren't very happy driving around in a Thule wagon like this. Not a great vehicle. But what kind of problems are you going to get with the Mitsubishi Outlander? You can get corrosion in the subframe, rust, and that actually starts to deteriorate the whole bottom line. Suspension is actually bolted to that, so that becomes a potential dangerous point if you're dealing with a vehicle with higher mileage that's been in salty conditions. Other issues are four-wheel drive faults, ABS issues, and with a lot of these vehicles, people are complaining that the hood's shaking and vibrating under speed when you hit about 40, 50 miles an hour. Allegedly, of course. but there's lots of people talking about it. People have also talked about premature brake wear there, that it just doesn't last as long as it should, as well as paint doesn't hold up very well against chips. As you can see, there's little chips there, little chips there. Now granted, nothing a little paint protection film can't cover, and a little cleaning under the undercarriage can't fix as well. So some of these problems are a little bit finicky, but the big issue is the fact that a lot of these vehicles run the CVT, the continuously variable transmission. As far as I'm concerned, a belt-driven transmission only belongs on a sled or a quad. Why are they trying to put them under vehicles? Now, according to Car Problem Zoo, a site that's actually focused on consumer feedback, transmissions are the most significant failure-prone part in a lot of these Outlanders. So how do you know you have a problem with one of these junky little wagons? Well, you could get juddering, you could get hesitation, sloppy acceleration, or maybe you... Oh yeah, the smell of smoke in the morning. What a beautiful aroma. Or just the fact that the vehicle slips and doesn't necessarily respond immediately to your throttle inputs, and you'll find it starts to get laggy, RPMs come up, but the speed of the vehicle does not commensurate. So I've literally said this about a lot of vehicles with the CVT. Nissan, Infiniti are really problematic vehicles as well, because they really love the Jatco transmission. So anything typically running with a continuously variable transmission, again, don't walk away, run away. And maybe instead of buying the Mitsubishi Outlander, possibly look at a RAV4 here by a Toyota. You're going to get far more miles out of it and far fewer problems. Right there. And here's the next wreck that's dressed in gray right behind me here, that has literally one of the worst transmissions of all time. As a matter of fact, according to Mr. Transmission, a local transmission shop who deals with vehicles like this all day long, literally reports that some of these vehicles lose their transmissions in as little as 100,000 kilometers. That's if you're lucky. But what kind of garbage is this? Well, before we talk about the transmission, let's talk about what a pathetic display we're looking at here. Look at the cheap plastic finishing right there. You've got some pretty basic headlights on this Ford, tiny cutesy little fog lamps, and of course a wannabe laser cut wheel, rust, early onset. Sure, you get a sunroof, but it probably doesn't work half the time. And the interior looks like it was made by Fisher-Price. What about the rest of this? Pretty basic looking taillight assembly and the flex fuel. Does that mean it's flexible, as in you can put gas, diesel, water perhaps? No, that couldn't be. But what we're talking about here is the Ford Focus right there. And let's face it, these cars were known for a plethora of quality control issues. While sure, they were one of the quieter vehicles while you're cruising down the road, the interior noise was kept at a minimum. Everything broke on this. There was electrical issues, door handle problems, fitment issues, coolant leaks. But the big issue that we're talking about is the transmission. And specifically, if you really want to get down to nitty gritty, it's a 2014 Ford Focus with the POWERSHIFT transmission. Or, I mean, POWERSHIFT transmission. Sorry, it's their version of a DCT, sort of an actuated version of a manual gearbox, and it never really worked very well. There was lots of moving parts, and it was just sloppy. Some of the issues that people complained about were hesitation, bucking, surging, and as a matter of fact, a lot of these vehicles, customers would say they'd plant the foot in at a rest and try to accelerate, and all of a sudden the car would go and it would stall right on the spot. And there was lots of complaints. And apparently there was a lawsuit that alleges that Ford even knew that there was all these quality control issues with this transmission and proceeded with them anyway. I don't know, not sure, but I do know this: if you make 100,000 kilometers or 60,000 miles out of this, count yourself really lucky, because these were poorly built, unreliable, undrivable, and it's actually shocking to me that this car is literally still sitting here, because it likely got towed in. But instead of a wreck like this, and you want something with a better transmission and a better drivability altogether, why don't you try one of these? Right there, we're talking about a Honda Civic. Hondas have always been reliable, and even more so when you're talking about getting one with a manual gearbox. That is truly the car to have if you're looking in that class of vehicle. Why anybody would buy a Ford Focus when you have something like this available to you is way beyond me. And the next one with serious transmission issues is this little toy right here. And the reason I say toy is it almost feels like this belongs on a golf course. Yeah, that's right. It's really not much bigger or smaller than your average golf cart. As a matter of fact, I'm wondering where those hookups are at the back here, where I can drop my golf clubs and scoot on off to the golf course. But in reality, sorry, I just couldn't resist, because it's literally that size. Very small, very petite, and very demure. But what we have here is this cutesy wootsy little Jeep. And what is it? And why is this a problem? But let's take a look first and really try to make heads or tails as to why somebody would buy this little unit. I mean, look right there. Doesn't that look like, you know, when you see those cartoons and somebody gets bashed on the head and then their eyes look like that? That's always what that looks like to me. Okay, great, you got this little exhaust tips here, but you know what's under there? A lot of carbon in there, or oil consumption for sure. Here, this is a 4x4, as pretty much every Jeep is. And it's cycling down the side. Yeah, it's a cute little design overall for sure. You got these little cute flares on the front, lots of plastic, because then it's good for kicking up stones and preventing from chipping the paint. The worst part is though, you rarely keep this thing on the road long enough to worry about rocks on the paint. But anyway, you've got some great little front spoiler on there. It gives it a little rugged look. Of course, following in the true Jeep tradition, they go with that silly little grille. And they're just trying to ride off that name, which is really, I don't think it's quite the name that it used to be, but either way, here we are, it's a Jeep. And we have a rugged roof on top with a roof rack that's good to haul 40 or 50 sheets of drywall on your way through your new construction project. But what about the interior? Fisher-Price and Glad garbage bag literally hybridized, and this is what you actually get as a result. Lots of hard plastics, lots of cheap materials, and shiny bits and pieces that you can literally spray out with a garden hose. And clearly, if you haven't recognized already, which Jeep is this? It's the Jeep Renegade right there. So what kind of issues do you have? How about suspension parts to start with? You can actually find issues with the vehicle bobbing and weaving or leaning to one side or the other, or not holding real stable on the roads in general. Broken tie rods have actually been a result of just even driving down conventional roadways. It appears to be very fragile. Another big issue seems to be emissions. Yet spews out way too many carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide emissions. It's just a pig. And also, not only on top of that, you have heavy oil consumption from this Tiger Shark engine. So if you're running that 2.4 liter engine inside that Tiger Shark, I'd like to call it more like the Perch, if you will. It's very lame, weak, and the worst part is it's using oil like it's going out of style. Some people say it uses as much as a liter per 1,000 miles. In many cases, a lot of people are finding it uses much more than that. And that is also part of the contributing factor to the higher tailpipe emissions. There's other issues related to the electrics. And if you can believe it, there's some customers that have complained that this vehicle will randomly just shut off at will. Not based on anything the driver itself is doing, but the fact that the vehicle just inadvertently stops and forces you roadside and you can't do anything about it. But we're here to talk about transmissions, and this vehicle is not exempt. Of course, we're talking about a Jeep, and with a lot of Jeep products, a lot of recent Dodge products, they're hit and miss with the transmissions. ZF 8-speed automatics are pretty good, but the 9-speed auto in this, which is a torque converter type transmission, is a problem. And it creates a lot of different random events. For example, squealing and howling noises, sometimes on acceleration, clunking, surging, as well as delayed acceleration on putting the gas down, and then it just waits, and then goes. Lots of different random events, and it's quite unreliable. Now, some of those were tuned up with some updated software, but at the end of the day, the transmission is odd, quirky, somewhat random, and very unreliable, like a lot of Jeep and Dodge products. Literally a notable transmission. If I can suggest you can get this in a manual, that's the way to get it. If you're going for the 9-speed auto, buyer beware. And here's the next unit that definitely fails the grade when it comes to talking about transmissions. And what we have here, obviously, is a Nissan right there. And obviously, it's an attractive car. And Nissan has produced a lot of great looking vehicles throughout the years, the Maximas, the Altimas. And what we have here is certainly no different. I mean, they've got great headlights like that are very bold on this Nissan. Great front splitters, look very, very bold and strong from the front and the side. Laser cut wheels. Of course, a very simplistic aero-looking mirror. We really don't have any sunroof here, but that's okay. We do have chrome on the door handles, which looks great, and an amazing rear tail light. And we have an SV Altima. So what could possibly be wrong with a great-looking vehicle like this? Nissan's always produced very interesting, cool, sporty, innovative vehicles. So what could possibly be the issues right here? Well, reliability in general is moderate. There have been issues with check engine lights and other general electrical problems, but one really interesting one is the rear doors. There's actually a recall by NHTSA that when you lowered those rear power windows, that it actually popped those rear doors open. That's right, it was a routing of the cabling, and it caused a real serious concern. Okay, so you take that to the dealer and you think, all right, we're out of the woods. Well, yeah, until about 50, 60,000 miles, and then you'll see how much out of the woods you really are, because in fact, these have the worst transmissions known to mankind in modern day history. Literally, a lot of these Nissans now are using something that's not much more than a rubber band. Yeah, they're not rubber, they are metallic, and it is effectively a belt. And why do they use a belt to drive this vehicle down the road? It's because it's a CVT. It's called a continuously variable transmission. It's very similar, if not slightly more complex than what you'd find in an all-terrain vehicle or a skidoo. It actually drives the wheels via belt, which is supposed to last for a long time, but there's a lot of issues with that. What are some of them? Well, some issues you can find is delayed acceleration. You put your foot down and there's a delay, rev, and then it goes. That's a scary one because that's a potential safety concern. If you're slowly trying to accelerate or inch out of a very congested area, that can cause potential hazards. Of course, the smell of smoke wafting through the cabin as the belts start to burn and slip. You can also get surging and juddering. It really doesn't take very long. Even do a Google search and you'll find virtually every Nissan in recent history using CVTs having weird drivability issues. Just check it out. The worst part is, it's not that it's a cheap belt either. In most cases, we're dealing with a repair that costs in around that $4,500 US to get that sorted out. So because of some of the general reliability concerns and that CVT transmission, which has garnered severe negative press, resale is absolutely brutal on these as well. And once you own these, you're pretty much committed financially. I know. Those are all such a huge disaster. Well, guess what? Check that video out. As I talked before, that's a list of 5 of the worst engines that you could possibly find on today's market and the vehicles you'll find them in. Hope you enjoyed it. See you real soon. Catch you then. Bye-bye.